Hi everyone and welcome back. So in this video we are going to talk about the second topic of the second module, and we are talking about nestjs Advanced. We have already covered in the last video we covered how we can dockerize the nestjs application. So what I will do is I will create the third application just by renaming the folders and just changing the scope in the package.json, because we are not going to just create each and every application from the scratch. It's all existing application, we just copied it, so it's all the nestjs setup we already have. And we are going to talk about the how we can handle the exceptions and how we can do the validations. So this is the second topic. So first topic, dockerizing the nestjs application, is done. Second topic is data validation, how we can do the payload validations which is coming to the request. Let's say you are writing a different kind of APIs, post, patch, and you are passing the payloads. Even you are passing the query parameters. So how you can do the validation of the data which you are passing, the type, string, number, email, URL, valid types and valid formats. Those kind of validations we can perform, and we can also validate by throwing the custom exceptions or the existing exceptions. These are some of the standard exceptions you can throw from your controller or your services that will be handled at the controller level, and nestjs will convert that into appropriate status code: not found, unauthorized, forbidden. All these exceptions automatically gets converted into their respective status codes. And you can also write your exception filters. What it does is it is just going to format or add additional properties like, okay, what is the method name, what was the timestamp. You can also send some code like status code, timestamp, path, method, message. These are the properties we are returning. So whenever there is an HTTP exception thrown from controller or service, that will be intercepted by this filter, and you will have just additional properties while you hit the API and see the response. Okay, this is how you can throw any custom exception, like existing exception from the controller. Throw new not found exception, throw new forbidden exception, throw new unprocessable entity exception, throw new forbidden, or any kind of standard exceptions you can throw. These are built-in HTTP exceptions. Like you don't need to do response.send.status, all those things now. If you are throwing any exceptions, that means nestjs will handle and convert that exception into a particular appropriate status code. And we are already using this filter, exception filter, that is doing its magic of adding a couple of more properties. So let's play with these things. So we are talking about DTO validations, and this is how we are applying the validation pipe at the controller level. So all the APIs which you are writing in the controller will have this validation pipe added, and with the help of this validation pipe we are doing the DTO validations. And what are the DTO is? DTO are the request objects which you are passing either in the query parameter, in the path parameter, in the payload, all these things, and you just create a separate DTOs for it. So let's say we already have a simple user APIs. I want to address a nested object in the user record as an address, which will be the address info DTO. So that is the custom type I'm going to create in my DTO class. That will have just a state and city. So with the help of that, we can just check, okay, this particular payload, like when you are creating a user, are you passing the address? And if you are passing, then it should have a city and state. Let's say if you are passing address empty, I will send you, okay, bad request. If you are passing only city, I will send you bad request. If you are passing the whole object inside address, okay, I'm passing you the, I'm allowing you to create user because your payload is valid. So these kind of things we can just create. So I just created address info DTO custom class. So because we need a custom type for it, it's a nested object. So we need, and we can pass this custom type in our existing user create user body DTO, right? So we can just use address info DTO there. Here I will change, okay, we have a city and we have a state. City is string, state is string, and here we can add another property that is an address, which will be is object type of object. First let's see how we apply the validations on an object, then we can also talk about an array. So this is public address and this is address info DTO. This is going to be an object. So we are using these class validator annotations: is object, is array, array min size, is string, is defined, is UUID, is not null. All these are actually is URL, is email, is string. All these are annotations or decorators provided by class validators on these class properties, so that these validations can be enforced by validation pipe. So here we are doing custom validation. So I'm using validate nested and validate type. So if when you are passing the address in the user object, which type should I validate against for this address? So I'm just passing validate type address info DTO. And yes, so this is simple address info DTO we are passing. This is having city and state. And now what I will do is I can just so this is a DTO, right? And this is how we can expose things on the Swagger docs, that okay, this is the example, this is how my payload should look like. This will tell Swagger, okay, just for the end user who is consuming it, we'll see this payload and we'll understand, okay, address should be of object with city and state and it is required false, because we are using is optional. That means if you are having is optional means it can override everything. That means you don't even pass this property, but if you are passing it, then you need to enforce and you need to follow these constraint. Okay, city and state must be there. So I will just change the scope of this package JSON, and then what we can do is we can use this NX console. I saw some comments that people are facing issues with NX console on the VS Code. Don't worry about it. You just have NX JSON or this individual repository also you can run. You don't need the whole monorepo setup. You can just have a particular folders from the apps, because it is independent, it has everything in it. So otherwise you can just execute these commands: pnpm exec nx run your repository, your application, colon the target build npm run run dev, something like this. And this is the typing errors in the entity. We forgot to import the address info DTO. Now we should be able to start our application. I think we also need to start the database that we haven't started. So we are doing build. So this is a simple command. You can also write manually pm, but I'm lazy and no one wants to write this long command. They just want to have some clicks around it. So everything works except the database. So I will just check what is the database host port, our Docker Compose file at the root. Here is our Docker Compose file. So you can have it just to spin up your Postgres container, so that if your nestjs application depends on the database, then you need to have this container running so that your application can start. So here we are doing Docker Compose up, and let's check the port and all. So here I will check env. It is port is 5432. Check the Docker Compose override. Okay, this is the mistake, 5432. I will restart the Docker, expose, map the host port with the container 5432 5432, and in the env we can use the same port to connect to the container Postgres app. So now we are starting it and this has started. Now we can check our application. So we can just check our application how it really looks now, like host 33010, and we will just go to the Swagger docs. And we will just see this hello, and I can see this address DTO is populated here. So let's say if I'm passing it, okay, it is missing authorization because that is required before you check the payload. So I will pass the empty, and here I will hit 400 bad request exception, but still I didn't get the exact message. Why? What is the reason of 400? So this is coming because I have this exception filters. Let's comment it and try to see what error. Okay, here I'm getting the proper message. So I need to access error.response.message in the exception filter. So that change we can enable it, and then we can go and try to change our implementation for this filter, exception filter inside core. So here we are doing exception.message. So we can try to log this exception and try to see what is the value we are getting, and then we'll try to see what is the exception object we are getting. So inside exception.response.message we can get the property. Okay, pass the token. And here I can see the payload validation works. Address must be a string. Something wrong with our DTO. I mean, we might have missed something. Let's see inside our user DTO, inside user domain. Okay, line number 55 is the problem, right? I think let's scroll down. Because why it is complaining? Because line number, okay. Yes, this is the problem. So now it is sorted. Now we can just create the users. Simple. This is how we can simply create the user. Now you can convert this into an array also. Let's say we want to pass this user address as an array. So here we can change these types. We can just set it as an is array, and we can also set is array min size. Array min size. That means if you are passing address, then you should be passing that as an array, and the min length of this array should be greater than 0. So array min size is 1. That is just another validation we have added. Is optional, validate nested. Okay, now here we also need to update the type in the entity, because that is the error coming. Address info DTO array. So we'll go to the user entity and we'll update the types. It should be now an array of address info DTO, and we'll try to create, we'll just reload this because we are just passing an object. It should be passed as an array. Let's see if I'm passing it. Okay, internal server error because okay, yeah, because it's sending me that user already exists. So we can just change this email and test it. It should work because address is nullable, and you can pass just an empty address. If we are passing it, then it should have at least one length. If I'm passing address empty, it will send 400 pad request. You can pass an array of address and everything should be fine. It should be able to create a user with that. Just fix the payload JSON object. Now it is creating the address. So these are like simple payload validations you can perform on your using your DTOs, class validators, and validation pipe. And apart from that, we can also play with the exception filters, like what all custom exceptions you can throw and how the nestjs is dealing with these exception thrown from the controller. So this is the library class validator we are using. So nestjs is internally handling these DTO payload validations when they are passed to the controllers. But if you want to do it manually, you write your class, you create the object of the class and do run validate method. It's same as the Joey and Jod. These are the two libraries for the payload validations or JavaScript object schema validation. Same thing we are doing with the class validator. Now what we are going to do is we will try to see what else we can validate. We can validate query parameter, path parameter, body. I mean anything we can validate using these DTOs, because we are using these custom classes @video body @params query. All these annotations we can use and pass the custom classes. Okay, so now let's say a simple example is how we can how there is a HTTP GET I'm writing and I'm passing the query parameter email and I'm passing the couple of IDs for which I want to fetch the users. So it's just like a random example. Here I'm passing email and the IDs are comma separated 1 2 3 4 5 6 7, because I want to fetch the users for only those users I want to get for which I'm passing the IDs. So by default this API gives all the users, but I want to get only the users for which the IDs I'm specifying in the URL. So how can we do the validation for this? First of all, validation is all these IDs should be of type string or number. Okay, I'm just considering them as a string, and we should be able to transform these comma separated IDs into an array while sending the data to the controller. So we need to use a class validator transform or class transformer to transform this query parameter. So here I'm just going to write this user query DTO. This is the class we can write inside DTO that should have an email and the IDs as two properties. IDs I'm expecting, I mean we need to use transform from the user. I'm getting that ID as a comma separated array, comma separated string values. and I wanted to transform that into an array of string. So here we are passing these IDs. Pass ID is comma separated. This is for end user who is consuming it. He will be passing the IDs as a comma separated, but I wanted to transform that into an array and send it to controller, so they can just use these IDs directly. Okay, so is optional, and here we can use transform. So these IDs are the string array, and is email we can remove. So we are transforming it, values of type string. If we are passing value, then we can just use value. If type of value is string, then we can split that by comma separated, otherwise return the value itself if that is not passed as a string. That is a simple transformation we are doing on top of the data we are getting. And this is saying expecting the callback. It is expecting the callback. So here we can simply pass each string, each true. And okay, there is some error. I used to do it like this. Maybe something has changed. I need to check the class transform or transform method, what has been changed recently. It is saying that type is incompatible. So I think it is the value we are passing is a values as a step single parameter now, but it has converted into as a callback. So this is the error, assignable of parameter incompatible type. Okay, so this is the error. This is the breaking change here in the, this is what we need to apply. We need to pass value as a destructured property value. Okay, we are passing it destructured, and then we are splitting that by comma separated, otherwise returning the value. Now we can play with this example, how it works. So we can just hit our APIs. We can just try to pass this query in our APIs, and then at fetch user, we'll just try to log it, what data we are getting. We can just do simple console.log and try to see the data. Okay, so let's go to our APIs and see what we are getting. So this is how we are passing email. I will pass the comma separated IDs. Execute. I will put the dummy header and then next. This is how we are passing. This is how the nestjs is passing it. That's fine. It can be, you can pass them manually by comma separated also. Here we are getting the values. I think it's coming undefined. IDs are coming undefined, though I think I know the reason. Maybe in the transformer I did something wrong. So let's debug this. IDs are coming 1 2 3 because here it should be value, not val, right? Obviously val is undefined, so it should be value. Now I'm getting that, and I'm able to get all these parameters. Now next thing is how we are throwing the exceptions, right? There are many ways you can throw the exceptions. You can simply, from your controller and services, you can throw these standard exceptions, throw new not found exception, throw new unauthorized exceptions and all. So here you can see from the controller, I'm throwing this exception, not found exception. And what will happen is when I'm hitting it, I will get the not found exception. Similarly, you can throw custom exceptions from here, throw new unauthorized exception, throw new forbidden exception, unauthorized exceptions, unprocessable entity exception 422, right? So it will automatically convert into the status code, unauthorized exception 401, forbidden exception 403. Okay, so that's all about this video. Now what we will do is in the next video, we'll talk about more about TypeORM and the nestjs.